Hey, this is Todd. Welcome to my show where I have conversations with interesting people and try to understand their models of how they think about the world. This time we have Marcus Filly on the show. Marcus is a multiple-time CrossFit Games athlete, both on a team as well as individually, and he is probably best known currently as the online progenitor of a lot of functional bodybuilding content, which is some pretty interesting stuff. Definitely changing the landscape as far as what training looks like in mixed modal fitness. And I think a lot of people are hopefully getting some pretty good principles from Marcus's stuff that he puts out there. But Marcus has been at it for a long time. Back in the day, I used to follow his training blog where he posted all of his workouts, videos of a lot of different stuff. And he's been part of the OPEC system for a while, which I've done a lot of continuing education with. So had some good back and forth on the change between the blog days of fitness as well as Instagram and social media and all that stuff that is currently, I guess, all the rage, quote unquote, as well as how Marcus finds balance between being an overly, maybe a bit aggressive to say overly, but very systematic person, and understanding how to find the balance between when to systemize and when to sort of go with the flow, as well as how he thinks about the platform that he has and the information that he puts out there, and then some of the negative consequences of that in terms of people having a lot of expectations of Marcus and his time and his desire to really help each person who actually reaches out to him and finding how he can maintain the focus on his actual priorities without just getting lost in endless requests. So if you're not on my email list, speaking of requests, I think you're missing out. Head over to toddneve.com and sign up there. And I hope you enjoy this conversation with Marcus Filly. Well, yeah, so you used to post all of your training. Was it a blog spot that you were posting on?
I was on a WordPress.
WordPress, got it. And yeah. The one with the ads, or did you install it yourself?
I can't remember. I don't think it had ads on it, but yeah. Then again, I wasn't always looking at it from the user side. I was just looking at it from my side, but I definitely paid some money for it, so hopefully it didn't have ads in it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I used to check on it, and I actually don't remember. But so back in the day, people used to post their workouts on blogs and have videos of their training, and coaches would check on it. And there were these like little isolated spheres of fitness being posted, as opposed to everything just kind of being slammed into Instagram, right? Where there's just this algorithmic feed of chaos happening all the time. So when you used to post your training, what was that like? I mean, you essentially had to post it for your coach to follow, right?
Yeah, that was more or less what it was about early on was, the remote coaching scene wasn't really as robust as it is now. And there were a couple good coaches that were out there that were offering to coach competitive CrossFit athletes remotely, and we didn't have like we didn't have like True Coach or any one of these kind of modern day fitness applications that can deliver programs. So you'd get an email from your coach, hey, this is what you're doing this week, and then create like a blog so that you can post your training results and add videos or whatever would be useful for the coach to see on what's happening with your training. It was pre-Instagram essentially.
Although I think there's a little bit of a difference too between having, the entirety of someone's training laid out, right? Whereas like, yeah, you posted everything you did, as opposed to Instagram, where it's kind of a highlight reel, so to speak, and then the most engaged posts are the ones that show up. So, because you were actually posting like literally everything you did, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely when it started. It was certainly, I think I believed my coach was paying more attention than he may have actually been paying. To my, I don't actually, in hindsight, like there was a lot of detail, and a lot of things that I put in there, and knowing what it's like to coach clients now and myself and having a lot of clients, there are certain things that you need to see as a coach, and there's certain things that are just part of the process. But yeah, I was detailing everything from, the down to the reps and sets that I was doing in training, training weights, uploading a lot of videos of my of what I was doing, full reflections on every single day of like how it felt to move and what I was learning about myself through training, what I was doing outside the gym, stuff that I was like putting in my body for food. I look back, it's like I had a lot of time on my hands to put into that, and the audience was tiny. Now the audience is much bigger, and I don't even have that much time to dedicate to putting together something as thoughtful and as comprehensive as I did.
Well, and to your point about, maybe your coach isn't paying attention to all the actual details that you're putting in there, that there may still be some value just in that reflection process on your end, right? Just like actually creating that document of like, okay, I'm going to pay enough attention to this to actually write down everything I did.
Well, that's where that's how it continued for so long, because past the time point where I knew my coach was paying detailed attention to what I was putting in there, I saw so much value in it for myself to just reflect on the experience. I mean, the purpose of competing in fitness and following a training design by a coach, and the rewards back then were so small that I wasn't doing it for anything other than like a journey into like self-growth and self-discovery as an athlete through movement. And so having a place to journal that was extremely valuable. And I actually got into blogging before I became a fitness blogger. I was like a travel blogger. I blogged about my travel experiences in different parts of the world that I had been to. And I just found a lot of joy and personal satisfaction in the process. And that carried over really well to what I was doing on my fitness blog. And I think it was almost 2.5, 3 years of me doing that, chronicling two years of training for the CrossFit Games as an individual athlete, and then a little bit into my a little bit beyond that, but things kind of shut down once social media really picked up, and that became just a little bit less of a time commitment, but also a way to continue to share a message that I was, proud and happy to share with people.
Is that travel blog still online?
It sure is. Yes. I will get you those.
Do you know the URL?
I do. It's I think it's at travelblog.org, and you can either search Marcus Philly, or I think it was I think my handle was Juggernaut. I don't know why that was. Yeah, it's like I'll get you the link on that, but those are some epic blog posts from my time in Southeast Asia and Australia, and there's some of the fondest memories of my life were chronicled in those maybe 30 to 40 posts that I did.
And I think that there's there's a difference in terms of the mindset, like you mentioned a second ago, about sort of cataloging something for your own processing and reflection versus actually sharing something with an audience. So what was your approach to, I guess, travel blogging and potentially your fitness blog? Was that mostly for yourself, or was that for an audience? And were you aware that people were potentially following that?
Yeah, I think I had a little bit of the audience in mind, but mostly it was just about me and what I felt like I wanted to write about. There was a lot of getting. I think traveling in those early 20s, for me, I found journaling to be something that I was just pulled and drawn to do. I think because there was so much happening in my life at that time that felt new and felt exciting, and I felt like I was exploring aspects of who I was, that every day I woke up and I just wanted to write it all down so I wouldn't forget it. And I had this very detailed journal that turned into multiple booklets that I filled up over the course of 3 to 4 months of backpacking. And then I would take those notes and then I would synthesize that into something that was, gonna end up on the blog. The audience for my travel blog was like my family back home, just like my friends and family that, wanted to know that I was okay. I mean, I tried to showcase like some highlights and let my poor parents know, like, this was before we were so connected. Like I'd had to go to like dial up, internet cafes to talk to them. I'm in somewhere in Cambodia and all they know is that it's dangerous and, I'm going to potentially die. And so I'm trying to like, get something up on the web so that they're like, oh, look, he's still healthy and happy. But yeah, for the most part, and then this also carried over to my fitness blog, was just what makes this a special experience for me, and what are the lessons that I'm learning. And to be honest, like the speaking to the actual audience didn't come for many years later until the social media became connected to my business, which happened kind of organically through the fitness blog into early stages of social media. But, now it's much more connected to it.
And do you remember a tipping point where you started to realize that, I don't know, maybe your time was better spent on social media, or that the audience had moved to social media, or that you personally were getting more fulfillment out of social media, or any of the above?
Well, I think the tipping point was that I stopped feeling a draw and a passion to sit down and write. Like I was very committed to it for many months and close to 2 years, where it was like every day was like the full, look inside my training experience. But at some point it started to feel difficult for me to fulfill on that and continue that. I was essentially getting burnt out of my own process. And when I started to feel like it wasn't inspired anymore, I just kind of moved away from it. It turned into once every few days. It turned into once every couple weeks. It turned into, recaps after major events. And then it just sort of let it quiet down. And it was also kind of at the point at which I knew my coach was no longer using it as a tool to track his clients. We had all kind of grown a bit beyond that. And I started to, engage a little bit more in social media, and I saw it as a way to just capture some of the, like you said, some of the highlights or the lowlights, whatever I felt like sharing in that particular time.
Got it. So you mentioned that you started to feel burned out just on the process. So is that something that you felt like you had created, like an overly rigid system for yourself that was more draining than it was helpful?
Yeah, I think that's something that that absolutely was happening for me. It had to chronicle every single thing I was doing in training, which and granted, like, the years had passed since I started it, and I was busier. I was busier with my business, my coaching, my training, my girlfriend at the time. There were more things happening in my life. So that just like, when I had all the time in the world traveling around Southeast Asia to sit in a coffee shop in the morning and write pen to paper for a couple hours, and then go for a walk, go to the beach, then go to an internet cafe and write a blog post for 90 minutes. Like, sure, I was totally invested in it. I was engaged. And then in 2014, when my gym was growing, I was starting to play grid. I was living in Arizona. I was doing, a bunch of PT hours every week. I was coaching group classes, girlfriend, like I didn't have 60 minutes or 30 minutes to sit down and write all this stuff. So I created, the structures that I had at stages of my life where I was more free didn't fit anymore. And this is a process that I'm juggling now as I get into parenthood and, being a business owner and continuing to evolve and grow as a person, where many things that I structured into my life for years, they don't fit this new structure and the new landscape of my life. And I have to like rediscover ways to engage in the stuff that I love in a different way that's more time sensitive and really speaks directly to like what I essentially really find fulfilling about the process.
And do you tend to systemize most of the things that you are working on, whether that's business, training, family, content creation, or do you more go with the flow, so to speak?
Yeah, I'm more of a systems guy for sure. I've been that way since I was like, 10 years old. I've always done that. And I still like to learn from other people that have developed great systems and take some of what they have shared with me and upgrade my systems over time. But I've always had an inherent draw to create systems, rhythm, structure. I think that allowed me to be successful in the sport of fitness while still growing a business and a career as a coach. And it's allowing me to kind of keep a lot of irons in the fire even now when I've got 2 kids and business that's growing, and also still wanting to be engaged athletically in my personal pursuits of fitness too.
And how do you decide if a system is actually valuable or if it's something that's potentially overly rigid and restricting you from being flexible enough to deal with the changing demands of something like business or family or training or any of these things that can kind of, compete for time and attention?
Sure. Yeah. That's a great question that I don't have, I don't think I have like a very, there are some systems that have outcomes or outcomes related to them that I could measure. So let's just take the social media thing. It's like, how much time and energy am I putting into social media? What kind of content am I trying to create every single week? And what does that process entail in terms of a time commitment? Okay, it's this. Is it yielding organic growth on social media? Are the followers going up? Do people enjoy that content by showing engagement? Those things are measurable and can see, okay, this is working, this is not working. With that said, there are plenty of things outside of our control with social media and how Instagram chooses to kind of move people up and down on the feed, but not all systems have something so black and white that you can measure and say it's working or not. So I really rely on just my intuitive sense, and also just sort of I guess it's like a feeling of, is this filling me up or is this draining me? And sometimes that's the feedback loop on that is slow. It's months will go by where a system that I've been adhering to very systematically is not working. But it took a couple months for me to get to a point where I'm like, wow, this is really not okay. And but a lot of people just go for months on end and maybe years on end. And I do feel like I've developed a pretty good sense of awareness to catch myself before things get, I carry out process or systems too far to the point where it's really just a negative impact on my life.
Yeah, I think that the tendency of some individuals is to always, like we talked about, systemize stuff and organize things, and the tendency for other individuals is to, leave things open and sort of free, and that, if you tend to be one way, you can get caught too much in that way, right? Where people who are overly systematic can need to relax a little bit and allow things to kind of flow, and people who are, tend to not enjoy structure and rules can potentially benefit from, learning to use a calendar or something. And I think that interplay is pretty interesting. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is kind of related to that, since in a conversation with James Fitzgerald, at one point he mentioned the let your hair down story relative to your performance in CrossFit. Do you mind sort of giving a background on that little quote?
Yeah. Well, I was one of the few athletes that was rocking long hair for those years. I think there's more man buns now than there used to be.
Yeah, but you don't have the sides of your head shaved.
No, I don't.
You gotta go man bun and sides of your head shaved.
Is that yeah, yeah? I don't know. I don't know that I could pull that off, but yeah. I mean, I just I don't know. The way I see that story and how it played out was, I think from when I started early on with James as a client, we've already talked about it a lot, but I was very calculated about everything that I was doing. And I believe that if I trained more smart than others, and if I was more precise and calculated than others, then I would win in the long run. I wasn't the big risk taker. I wasn't I think he refers to it as like high perception, low perception. I was high perception as an athlete. I thought about everything, and so you couldn't sneak something past me. Once I learned the concept of pacing, or I was a pacer. To get me to go hot and just really push to high threshold and risk kind of blowing up was hard to get me to do. And those things served me really well to a point at which I had become kind of too good for my own good. Like I was too methodical, and that the next level of growth for me was going to come from sort of letting go a little bit, taking some more risks, and James was trying to teach me that in some way, and kind of connected to this mantra of let your hair down, where it's like you gotta let go a little bit. You're trying to control things, and you're good at that, but the next level is not gonna just arrive with that same mentality. And it was definitely true. And I started to recognize that. And when I played my first season of Grid League, where things changed, like the nature of the sport was totally different than CrossFit, and it pushed us to work at speeds and intensities that none of us had felt maybe ever. And I knew that wasn't going to translate well to being a better CrossFitter from a physical fitness characteristics standpoint. But what I did know was that I needed a chance to kind of extend myself beyond just what I had done before, and being a reserved, controlled, paced athlete. And so it helped me mentally. And I recall years of being in competition, and spectators, friends of mine saying, "Oh, Marcus, you always look so like you're like so in control. Like I want to just like yell at you to go faster because you look like you could go faster." And what's going on internally in my brain during those moments maybe doesn't match up what they see, but there was some truth to it. It was like, okay, are you just holding back a little bit because you're afraid of something that might happen on the other side?
Yeah, that that tendency to hold back could be either, like you mentioned, just like a tendency to want to organize and control and be in charge of what's happening, or it could be a little bit of a fear of exposure, right? And it's maybe a combination of both. So which of those do you think was the case for you?
Probably more of like the fear of exposure. I think in my early days of CrossFit competition, before I got coaching and learned more about the sport, I got rocked a few times. And I think if you get rocked a few times in fitness, it's depending on the type of person you are, it can really freak you out. It can really kind of make you want to like pull back a little bit. And I think that happened certainly for me. Have some very, very detailed recollections of events that went south, for me. And like 2010 sectionals, the individual event chipper that was at the end of the Northern California sectionals I was really new onto the scene, and I had a great first day and a half where I essentially was hanging with the big dogs, like guys that I looked up to. Pat Barber, Neil Maddox was on the scene, Gabe Subry, Blair Morrison, all these guys were there, and I was right there with them. And so I came out in the final workout, and I came out not thinking I was like going hot or anything like that, but it was this pretty long chipper, and I kind of got to like the 50-yard line of a 100-yard walking lunge after a set of burpees with a lot of work left to go, and I was way out in front, and I was like, like why am I so far in front of everybody? And I got to the end of the lunges. I picked up the dumbbells to start this mega madness, and I was like, whoa, I'm smoked. And I have another 20 minutes left to work out. And I just went into like a dark, dark pain cave for the next 20 minutes and ended up getting passed by just about everybody, in particular a local CrossFit coach that I knew who was not half the athlete that I was. And he beat me by a lot in this workout. And I was like, geez, like that was bad. That was I got exposed big time in this workout. And I got to learn how to not let that happen again. So that kind of like scarred me a little bit for sure.
Yeah, that there's in the whatever trajectory of development of an athlete, that there's an element of learning how to control yourself and pace yourself. And then once you've learned that, there's an element of learning when to actually let that go. So for you, if you think about this concept of, holding back and pacing and systemizing and controlling variables, as well as, turning it off and just, let's say, expressing or racing, how do you decide both for yourself and for clients when to have people learn to control stuff and to pace, and when to have people actually just, go full, I don't know. What's one of the terms that people use?
Ham.
Ham. Yes,
Yeah.
There we go. Ham. That's the abbreviation. Full send. That's another one people say, right?
Yeah, I don't know. The full send one, I haven't actually effectively used that in like a sentence. So I'm like, maybe I'm too old for that one. I don't know if I can go there yet. Yeah, well, I think for clients or for myself, it's about just like getting to understand someone's essence, and then determining if they need help getting outside of their essence in order to make progress, right? If somebody's like this systematized, controlled person, and they're trying to just come into the gym and put together a general fitness program that's going to let them feel good and look good, then perhaps there's no real need to ever push that person to really let their hair down and go for it in the gym. It doesn't serve their purpose. That's actually just, they have a really good skill set to come in and execute on a 3 to 4 day a week, resistance training program with some aerobic work. Or you've got this like young kid who wants to come in and wants to train to be a competitive fitness athlete, and you put them through a couple tests, and they're just a cheetah. They just want to sprint everything, and they're extremely powerful. And you tell them, "Oh, I want you to do this." They go extremely fast and explode. So it's like, okay, we have to teach this person how to be more reserved and how to pull back. Or you get somebody that comes in and is the opposite, right? Like myself, or learn like I did, and then got into a situation where there was a need to kind of create room for another gear to show up. And so it's determining whether the person really, it's going to serve their greater purpose to pull them outside of their essence and challenge them in a new way. And that could be like from a physical standpoint, it's going to help them achieve better physical traits and body composition, better performance, or from like an emotional standpoint, is this going to stretch somebody outside of their comfort zone so that they can grow emotionally and become a more resilient, person and develop stronger character, psychological benefits to that too. And if you're going to really set somebody up to be successful in that, and I'm using physical fitness as the medium to try and give people chances to express those different sides, whether it's the go fast and hard and risk and let your hair down, or it's control, be reserved, pace, control, systematize, then you have to really create the right scenarios within training so that people can do that successfully. And that's a harder task than many people think. They think, oh, I'll just write this really hard workout and that'll make this person push themselves. But we both know that writing a hard workout doesn't necessarily get at the traits that we're talking about. It just means that it's just a bunch of random nonsense that people are getting challenged to just complete, but it doesn't necessarily bring out the essence that we're looking to bring out in them.
Yeah, and they'll probably just complete it based upon whatever their natural tendency is, right? That if they are someone who tends to hold back in pace and control, that they'll still approach something hard like that because they're comfortable doing it that way.
Exactly.
So we are talking about these different types of athletes, and you spent a lot of time training with a particular specimen of an athlete named Danny Nichols.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories of training with Danny that are worth sharing?
Sure, definitely. Well, Danny was let's see. Danny came into my life when I was just about to open up my first CrossFit gym. So it was like 2010. He showed up and he was just coming to the weightlifting club at our gym to do some Olympic weightlifting. And I heard about some guy who clean and jerked 400 pounds in weightlifting club. And I knew Danny from like high school, like just knew of him because we grew up in the same area. But I was like,
did you go to high school together or just?
We went to like not rival high schools, but like high schools in the same county. And he was just like 2 or 3 years older than me in school. So, but it was just somebody like a name that a lot of people in the county knew him, especially if you were an athlete, you played any sport, you had heard of Danny Nichols. He was just super talented athlete, even in high school. I think he played baseball, football, and basketball and was, good at all of them. But yeah, so of course, first it was just like, I got to go see somebody this strong. And then, and then some of the other, talk about somebody who didn't have any understanding of what it meant to be sustained and slow and, learn how to breathe. Like we're doing workouts at the gym where it was like run 400, CrossFit workout in a class. So like some of his first classes were like run 400 meters, come in, do some, pull-ups and do some burpees and then go run again. Well, of course, Danny is a sprinter, and he runs a 400 in like 50 seconds, and that's pretty much all he's going to do the rest of the day. And so there was plenty of instances of him just, finishing first on the first round and then probably not even finishing the workout and just kind of calling it a day after round, 2. And that was, again, like just me seeing this guy kind of coming up until there was like a point at which I was like, look, this guy's developing as an athlete. He's a good guy. I'd like him to be my training partner. I kind of approached him in that way. I was like, hey, let's train together. And just so many amazing memories of just being, these are like pre having individual coaches, we were just following group training, models together, online blogs and stuff like that. But we did everything. We did everything from running hill sprints to, doing banded squat jumps to lifting heavy to me teaching him how to do kipping pull-ups by putting lifting straps on the pull-up bar so that he could hold his 250-pound frame and get more volume in, because he would just crap out. He couldn't hold himself up on the bar. And I was like, well, we got to teach you how to kip. You got to learn how to do this. So let's strap you to the pull-up rig. So I got this 250-pound gorilla just, basically locked to the pull-up bar and doing kipping pull-ups. It's pretty amazing. Oh,
well, that's definitely.
And I did, in preparation for this, I did recall one story that I do think is worth sharing about Danny, and this was a competitive story of Danny, which is in Grid. For those people that followed Grid and Grid League when it was a sport, he and I were teammates. This was a high-speed CrossFit spin-off team competition series that had aspirations of making TV kind of fame out of the sport. It was a great experience for a lot of us, and it was one of the most brutal physical challenges I've ever been through in my life, more so than some of the toughest CrossFit games that I had been a part of. But essentially what happens is there's these races, and in race 11 of a particular match, there's 8 people on your team go out and do something at really high speed, and they run off and tag the other teammate and so forth. And so Danny had the task of doing, I think it was the final element of this race, which is where the race came down to who was going to win, was 10 clean and jerks at 225 as fast as you can. So sprint 50 yards or 30 yards, do 10 clean and jerks at 225 pounds as fast as you can, run off another 50 yards, and you're done. And if you can do that unbroken and fast like he can, I mean, he can move that barbell like most of us try and move 135 pounds when we do Grace. It's extremely exhausting. That's about 50 seconds of all-out work with the sprint and so he does that, and we're playing LA, and it's this dramatic win. He finishes it, sprints off, we win the match. It's over, we're all excited. And they go back to the film, and they threw a flag on the play or on the race because somebody on my team hadn't completed all the reps that they were supposed to complete. So what happens then if they find out that happens, we have to race again. So unfortunately, the person that had not completed all their reps was me. And so I had essentially screwed up and made it such that Danny had to do this whole thing over again, because the way you finish a race when they have to replay it is only the last 2 elements of race 11 go again. So the person before him had to do 20 chest to bars, which is no sweat off their back. But then Danny, who was already in a pile of heaping pain, somehow manages to get back up on his feet, do the same thing over again about 4 minutes later. And I haven't seen Danny in as much pain as that ever. And it was a product of my screw up. So that was one of the best and worst experiences for him ever.
Would you say that you let your hair down too much and started skipping reps?
Yeah. Well, it's a clusterfuck out there with the referees calling reps, and you can't hear anything. You're trying to go as fast as you can. I think I had to do 15 overhead squats at 185 pounds, and I was just going until someone told me it was time to run off, and then apparently it was not time to run off.
I heard another story from the Grid days of Craig Kenney potentially vomiting on the did he vomit actually during the actual race? Did he vomit on the field, so to speak? What was the deal with that?
Oh man, no, not that I recall. I don't think Craig ever threw up during a race. Craig may have thrown up behind the scenes, behind the curtain. But the thing that Craig Kenney did was, he is one of the most intense individuals I've ever seen compete, like really laser focused. And in a situation like that where you got about 20 seconds to go as hard as you possibly can, Craig, we get a look in his eyes and you just knew it's like, this guy means business. He came out, and as a first element in one of those races, he had to do something like 12 power snatches at like 165 pounds or something like that. So not easy, but he's trying to move it as fast as he can. Well, they were lenient on the bouncing the bar off the ground concept, which many CrossFitters have they've come to learn about over the years. It's like if you get some bouncy plates and you got a bouncy floor and you take that bar and you kind of slam it against the ground, well, touch and go power cleans, snatches, deadlifts, they're a lot easier. So Craig took full advantage of this, and he was slamming the bar against the ground so hard that he literally broke his hand. He broke his hand doing touch and go power snatches. I mean, his hand it had ballooned up by the end of the match. I think that was the last race, but by the next day, his hand looked like he had a latex glove with air blown into it on his mitten. It was I was like, man, I don't know anybody that goes so hard that they break their own hand doing touch and go power snatches like Craig Kenney.
I think something similar happened to Ryan Rappaport, who I was coaching at the time of the grid season, because he was doing some sort of like burpee with dumbbell ground to overhead thing.
Yeah.
And just like same idea, just slamming the dumbbells into the ground. For months afterwards, he couldn't hang up from a pull-up bar. Maybe I should have had him use lifting straps.
Yeah, the lifting straps is keep that in your toolbox as a coach. You don't have pull-ups? You only got 5? You can only do 5? Okay, take these lifting straps and a lot of chalk and tape. We'll get you up to 10 immediately.
That's definitely like a pretty that's a pretty intelligent progression, I think.
I think it helped Danny. If you ask Danny, if you ever speak to him, he'll be like, "Oh yeah, that was super effective. It was really helpful for him. He made progress fast. Plus, he was losing weight pretty quickly because he was going from eating like when I met him, no joke. I think Danny ate at McDonald's 4 times a day. That was his diet, and he was just eating off the dollar menu for 4 times a day. And we got him eating a few vegetables. We got him eating some real food, and he just started losing weight like, overnight. He was just transformed.
Yeah, that's well, you know what? There's those competing documentaries, right? Super Size Me, where the guy eats only McDonald's and gains a bunch of weight, and then some reaction to Super Size Me where the guy eats only McDonald's and loses a bunch of weight. So I guess
yeah. Well, I would say that losing weight or gaining weight, McDonald's is definitely not a good way to live long and prosper.
Well, Marcus, we talked a few times about the different like businesses and endeavors that you have going on. There's a lot of them. What's the deal with that? Why do you have so many things that you're doing, and what are they?
Well, I think the public perception is that I've got a lot of different things going on, but in my mind, it's really not. It's really all kind of one more or less unified pursuit, which is, it was originally start a career in fitness, health and fitness coaching, and do whatever I can to reach and influence positively as many people as possible. So now all of that really falls under the umbrella of Revival Strength, my coaching brand. Within Revival Strength, we've got different channels that we reach our athletes through, that we educate, that we coach, that we try and make positive impact in people's training and fitness lives. Some of those being a gym, a physical gym here, where we have members, on-site local members that come and train. There's, of course, my online coaching, remote coaching business, which we have a handful of coaches that do that for us. We've got online training programs, functional bodybuilding training programs, which again, that's just for a different audience, an audience that's perhaps not ready to make the commitment to individual coaching, but like the training principles, and it serves as a way to teach people and educate them on training concepts that they can use and hopefully better themselves moving forward. So again, and there's also there for years there was a supplement brand that kind of went with the went with the business too, and that was just we're coaching clients, we're telling them what they should be taking for their nourishment, supplementation, and providing a source that we felt confident that was going to give them what they need and not give them stuff that they didn't need. So yeah, it can seem like a lot from the outside, but my mission always has been to keep it all very unified. And if any one part really doesn't align with the core values of the company or my core values as a coach and as an athlete, then it usually it doesn't last, or it doesn't become part of the system.
So based upon these different areas, as far as online stuff, in-person stuff, remote coaching, group sort of programming through functional bodybuilding, the one that kind of sticks out to me is the in-person coaching that you do at your actual facility. And given that you were part owner of a CrossFit facility, or a few of them potentially over a few years, and that you've had some success with online coaching, why would you go back into the in-person model, right? Because as a gym owner myself, I recognize the extreme challenges of facility operation, especially relative to the low overhead and just much easier option of doing online stuff.
Well, that's a good question. I think for the online business of ours to be to continue to make an impact, there needs to be a physical place and presence somewhere. The collaboration that happens between the coaching staff that delivers online coaching happens in one physical space. The place where I do my own training and get inspired happens in a physical place. The place where we film and develop social media and meet and online content, that all happens in a physical space. So, for all those reasons, we have to have a physical location, or that's been my process and my method, is to have a physical location where we can collect all that, good energy and culture, and that culture is then people see that culture, and that gets communicated through our online channels, and that's what I think attracts people to want to be part of Revival Strength. So since we have that physical location, since it's here and it exists, and I also have this county that I live in and I grew up in, where I also was a facility owner for 5 years as a CrossFit gym owner, and I have a reputation, and the coaches that work with me here have community and have networks in this county. It always felt like something I wanted to open up and extend to the people that were in this vicinity. I also believe that the act of coaching people in person and having a physical connection with clients, for myself and for the coaches that work here as well, is extremely valuable in keeping them sharp and helping them continue to grow as coaches, so that they can better serve clients who maybe do fit the remote coaching model well, but they don't get to see often. Being able to give people physical cues is something that upgrades kind of your program design skills, so that you can be an effective and efficient coach for online clients. And then lastly, it was always just my dream to have a facility that serviced the local population. I see that having long-term staying power. I don't know what the online fitness industry is going to continue to transform into over the years, and what if some of the things that I do online will still continue to be really sustainable long term. There's something about diversifying sort of the ways that I deliver business and deliver coaching that feels safer to me, and also keeps me fulfilled and enjoying the process too. I don't want to live behind a computer screen for 10 hours a day. I like to interact with people, and it fills me up tremendously to go out into the gym floor and see faces and connect, and I also, I recognize that all the parts of the business that happen online as well are very important to the health of everybody involved. So don't want to lose sight of either.
Yeah, I thought what you said about the in-person aspect of coaching being almost necessary to really develop the skill set and maintain the skill set of coaching online as pretty insightful. Right, that a lot of people, can get to the point where they are, let's say, influencer, to use a somewhat obnoxious term that I don't love, but that once you sort of reach that state, that you can just kind of sit back and rely on that. And you do see a lot of people who potentially in the past had experience in the trenches and had stuff to offer, but then have sort of reached a point where now it's like, well, my job now is just to create content and take pictures, and I no longer actually have insight to offer based upon my real life experience.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, I think it's key. It's totally key. And for any coaches that might be listening to this, and I get asked a lot, like, how can I grow my online coaching business? And I'm like, well, do a really great job with the people that you're coaching in person. And when they have people and friends that they want to refer to you that don't live near you, then you potentially have yourself an online business that happens. My online business really got its origins from my blog that we talked about already, which was that little micro community out there that was paying attention to it. They periodically would reach out and say, hey, will you coach me in the way that I see that you're being coached? So it happened very organically. I didn't really try and build that. But I was always focused on coaching people at my gym really well. And that's where I got a lot of the skills to be able to coach people in a remote setting.
And we spent a while earlier talking about social media versus blogging, et cetera. And now that you do have these various platforms with some traction, as well as a few different businesses that potentially do rely on an element of content creation and engaging with an audience, how do you think about what you're creating and putting out there? Are you focused on creating for an audience and thinking about the problems that they're trying to solve, or are you focused on your own journey and your own insights and wanting to share that, maybe like you were with your travel blog, or is it some combination of the two?
Let's see. It kind of goes back and forth. I mean, the stuff that for a number of years I was just writing about my own personal experience, how I was experiencing fitness, and what was it getting me excited in the gym, and what got me excited. I think that just resonated with other people, and that's when I started to get, I started to listen to what, the audience was saying, people that were engaged, and hearing, oh, this is what people are wanting. At which point I started to try and morph the message a little bit more to cater to that audience, give them more examples of the training concepts that they seem to like more, comment more on, or be more engaged with. To a point where I think I kind of really went very far with that. And I was like, okay, I see a need, and I see a problem that's happening out in the community based upon the conversations that I'm having with audience members. This is what's engaging them. I'm going to write all my content geared towards that. And that was really the message of functional bodybuilding and quality over quantity, and stop burning yourself out. You don't have to be pushing intensity every single day to be successful in your health and fitness journey, to feel good, to look good. In fact, to feel good and look good, you may actually want to rethink the concept of intensity altogether. And I still think that's a very valuable message that I want to continue to share with the community, because there's still a lot of people that haven't heard it yet, and they're still suffering. And there's worldwide groups and communities that are out there that are coming into the peak of the CrossFit movement in their countries later than the United States. And so they're a few years behind having a big cohort of people hit that burnout phase of CrossFit that's coming. And it will continue to happen to people that do it for too long without thoughtful programming, periodization, etc. So I want to keep sharing that. But then it's like, what's relevant to me right now? What's getting me excited within my own personal fitness pursuits? And yeah, so I want to continue to keep a balance between, speaking a message to the audience that I believe that they want to hear versus this is what I want to say. And it's kind of like, one is more like I'm doing it to learn about myself and to learn what people want to hear. And it's sort of like research in a sense, like what's resonating with people out there, versus I know that this resonates with a certain audience, and I want to make sure that they hear it enough so that they're continuing to get value from me.
Do you think that cycle of focusing on intensity and then reaching burnout or potentially coming close to it before potentially coming back to let's say more sustainable training principles is almost necessary for people, or do you think that it's possible to have a widespread adoption of a system that doesn't include that that ramp up phase into excessive intensity?
I think
almost like we were talking about with athletes earlier, right? Where it's like people potentially have to go too hot, then learn to pace, then learn to push again.
Sure.
Right? Do you think that's similar for like a general population person?
I think people can fall into either camp. So you got somebody who's already caught a little bit of the intensity bug. They're likely going to have to play that thing out until they reach, a negative, let's say some point where they're getting negative results or it's negatively impacting them. Because if somebody's in that phase, that honeymoon phase, I think back to when I first got into CrossFit and I was like just vibing off the whole process. If somebody was like, "Hey, you need to slow this down. This is going to end badly for you," I'd been like, "Fuck you! Like I'm on the rise. You don't know what you don't know what I'm about." So that person in that group might not it might not land so well if you try and tell them, hey, there's kind of this more sustainable approach to how you might want to go about your fitness. But somebody's general population comes in and who's just like, hey, I want to get healthy and fit, then yeah, absolutely, there's a way to introduce them to a sustainable model of training that doesn't ever even touch on that super intensity. High intensity is the end all be all. I think that it's just where you capture somebody at what stage of the journey that they're in, and then what their goals are. And again, I'm certainly not opposed to using intensity and prescribing intensity to people. It's just like, does this person have they earned the right to do that through taking care of themselves outside of the gym? And those cases are few and far between from what I see, especially in general population in their mid-30s and beyond, where people have real life obligations and stressors and are trying to just navigate this lifestyle that many people are in, which is work, family obligations. I'm going to try and squeeze in the gym, not eating a very well-balanced diet, maybe not sleeping enough, stress profile is a little out of whack. All of those things are going to, would limit somebody's ability, in my opinion, to handle intensity.
Yeah. So given that you have a relatively sizable audience at this point of people who are paying attention to some of the messaging that you have about, fitness, functional bodybuilding, intensity versus sustainability, but that a lot of these people don't necessarily have a coaching background or a lot of reference experience to really try to parse out like the nuances and details of all this stuff. How do you think about the messages that you're putting out there, given that people are going to misconstrue them and potentially take information out of context and execute things improperly?
Yeah, I'm totally fine with it. I really don't have an issue with it. I I sit down and I write things with I know my intention and I know my purpose on my end, what I'm trying to communicate and convey. I think that it's doing more good than it's doing harm. And there are absolutely people that are going to, you know, I'm going to write 10 social media posts. 8 of them are going to be about, you know, intensity versus sustainability. And here are some concepts and ways that you can approach fitness to better you over the course of the next 10 to 20 years when you really want to see results happen. And then 2 of them are going to be just gross, tough testers that I posted because I still do that kind of stuff in my training from time to time. And they're going to do the 2 workouts that look gross and nasty, and they're not going to pay attention to the other 8. And that's fine. If that's what if that's what they're going to take from it, then that's okay. I mean, there have been plenty of things that I have done on social media to get people to pay attention that aren't necessarily about speaking like a really, it's like I'm trying to build awareness from people or build an audience so that when the time comes to speak a really clear message that it lands on somebody, and I have to do that 100 times for them to hear it, then that's what I'm going to continue to do. And if they miss it the first 99 times or they get it that last time, then great. And yeah, it's just kind of what I've. It's part of. I think it's part of. If you want to call it a game, it's a little bit of a game. I mean, I certainly don't put anything out that I think is wrong or intentionally going to harm somebody or take somebody down a bad path. And there are things that I probably wrote about 3 years ago that I would not write about anymore because I'm like, oh, I'm not into that. I don't believe in that as much. But that's still in line with just sort of this whole process of evolving as like a person and as a coach and as an athlete. Like I don't know everything. I'm not even close. But I know a lot, and I'm going to keep trying to share it. And by trying to share this stuff and teaching or communicating a message, it just helps me refine that over time, and I get more and more clear about what actually is landing with people. So, yeah, it's definitely okay to me that some of the message gets lost upon people along the way.
Yeah, and you have enough, like you said, just feedback from people that you are able to kind of iterate and figure out what's working, what's not working. And there's also just that element of, it's a marker of success when you start to receive negative comments, right? That you're not getting negativity or misrepresentation or misunderstanding, that means no one's listening. But once there's a large enough audience, some percentage is going to just miss the point, kind of no matter what you do.
That's absolutely right. There's my share of negativity coming at me for sure.
And does that faze you at all, or are you relatively resilient to that?
Yeah, no, it never feels good. I mean, I don't think I get as much as some other individuals that are out there. And maybe it's because I try and play it too safe sometimes, and I don't really, I'm not like, I don't try and go to the extremes in any direction. But yeah, it's when somebody actually like takes the time to write something that's hurtful or negative, or the things that really get to me are when someone just like starts to call out aspects of my character, because they think they know me from a few social media interactions. That always is hard. And And then the hardest ones are when people feel like I have sort of let them down, or I've been like, people feel slighted, like I don't give them their due attention that they deserve. Somebody hits me on a DM and I give them a response, but a short, brief response, and they're like, man, what a dick. Like, you barely even wrote back to me. Like, I ask you a bunch of questions. I like all your posts. I comment all the time, and you can't even take 2 seconds to write me back. And I'm, those always make me pause and be like, okay, let me like have a little moment of self-reflection and be like, what else could I have done for this person? How could I have been a better mentor, model, role model to them? Yeah. Okay, I've gotten a couple of like, hey, you kind of barely even said what's up to me at the event that I saw you at. Like, I wanted to talk to you, but you seemed like you were too busy and you didn't have time. And those hurt too, because I really try and make myself available to people. And for years, I've made myself really available to the fitness community in so many ways, through writing my blog, through posting on social media, through being being very active and engaged in my direct messages. I mean, I respond to all of them personally, not somebody doing it for me. Trying to meet and say hi to as many people as I can at events, even if it meant my wife feeling like she was, not enjoying herself or feeling second best to a bunch of people she didn't know and I didn't know. So yeah, it hurts to hear that sometimes, but I just look at it as an opportunity to, like, again, reflect, think about how I could do better, slow down a little bit, pay more attention, be mindful about where I can add value to people's lives and communicate directly with them. And then also try and be boundaried when in order to really give time and energy to the people that matter the most to me, which are my close loved ones, like my wife and my kids and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there's a trade-off, right? There's an opportunity cost to your time and energy, which I think that let's say people messaging you on Instagram may not recognize, right? That they don't potentially recognize the volume of messages that you receive and the requests for your time, and that when you are potentially responding to their message, that you're not responding to someone else's message, or like you mentioned, that you're not spending time with your wife, or you're not creating content that could go to hundreds of thousands of people rather than to just them. And that there's not necessarily a perfect algorithm for how much you should allocate time to each of those, but that, I think it's potentially hard for people to recognize what they are asking of you when they do want your time.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's absolutely right. And, I'm just learning how to calculate that opportunity cost with my time. It's more and more every year, because there are just more. There seem to be more things in my life than ever before. So, and I know that's not going to be the case forever. I mean, we have phases of life that we go through where lots of things come into our circle and we get busy, and it's all good. And I'm like grateful for all of it, because in 5 to 10 years, it might not be that way. And there might not be as much on my plate. And things will have a natural slow down to them. But until then, it's like I really want to continue to stay on top of as many things as I can, without letting myself kind of burn to the ground in the process, because I'm the one that's sort of in the middle of it all.
Yeah, it's not just the opportunity cost of your time, but your long-term ability to keep creating stuff and putting stuff out there, where if you dig too deep now, your output in 6 months might be less. That's another thing.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's really smart. Well, Marcus, I've appreciated the spending of your time here with me today. And I recognize the opportunity cost of that relative to how many social media posts could have been made and how many DMs could have been responded to. So yeah, thanks for taking the time. And if people are interested in your stuff, you have a lot of places that they can go. What is the thing that you want them to do?
Aside from just following on social media, I mean, I really think people need to go to revival-strength.com, and they need to, I invite you to sign up for my email list where I send out weekly content that is, the mission every week is provide some value on a deeper level with more context than what I'm putting out on social media. So there's some really cool stuff that we're doing, and that's how we stay in touch with our audience.
Is that on the Revival Strength website?
It is, yeah. So there's just on the
like
front page is an opt-in, and you'll get like a sample training program and a nutrition download when you're at it. But yeah,
I feel like I signed up for that and I don't get anything, so I need to maybe check.
Oh yeah, you need to check on that. You need to go and put that into your contacts so it doesn't end up in your spam filter.
I have a whole separate email address for newsletters that I read every morning.
Oh, that's cool.
And I don't get any from you, so I'm gonna have to figure out what happened there. I may have screwed that up somehow.
Okay. Well, if we screwed it up, let us know. We'll fix it.
Thanks for listening all the way through. I admire your grit, your persistence, and your perseverance. Since you made it, I have a few favors to ask of you. Go ahead and open up the show notes on whatever podcast player you use. In there, you'll find links to all the resources that were mentioned throughout the show. There's also some links there in which you can leave a review or subscribe to the show. And podcasters are always harping on this because this actually makes a difference in terms of the algorithms that recommend podcasts to new people. So if you do that, it helps more people find the show. And if you head over to toddneef.com, you can sign up to receive most of my thoughts and writing, which really only go out to the email list. A lot of it never makes it to the blog or the podcast. So if you like what I have to say and you want to see some of my recommendations and stuff that I've been checking out, go ahead and subscribe to that email newsletter as well.